Hello out there. Welcome to Wake Up to the Bible. I'm Daniel Kaplan. I'm here with my father, Dr. Kaplan, and we're going through the books of the law, Genesis through Deuteronomy, over the course of this year. A little bit every day. We read it and then we discuss what we have read. Today we are going to be reading Genesis 24:10 through 26, and I'm reading from the Robert Alter translation. And his servant took 10 camels from his master's camels, with all the bounty of his master in his hand, and he rose and went to Aram Naharaim, to the city of Nahor. And he made the camels kneel outside the city by the well of water at eventide, the hour when the water drawing women come out. And he said, Lord, God of my master Abraham, pray, grant me good speed this day, and do kindness with my master Abraham. Here I am, poised by the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the town are coming out to draw water. Let it be that the young woman, to whom I say, pray, tip down your jug that I may drink. If she says, drink, and your camels too, I shall water. For she it is whom you have marked for your servant, for Isaac. And by this I shall know that you have done kindness with my master. He had barely finished with them when, look, Rebekah was coming out, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, with her jug on her shoulder. And the young woman was very comely to look at, a virgin, no man had known her. And she came down to the spring and filled her jug and came back up. And the servant ran toward her and said, pray, let me sip a bit of water from your jug. And she said, drink, my lord. And she hurried and lowered her jug onto her hand and let him drink. And she said, let him drink his fill, and said, for your camels too I shall draw water until they drink their fill. And she hurried and emptied her jug into the trough, and she ran again to the well to draw water and drew water for all his camels. And the man was staring at her, keeping silent, to know whether the Lord had granted success to his journey. And it happened, when the camels had drunk their fill, that the man took a gold nose ring, a beka in weight, and 2 bracelets for her arms, 10 gold shekels in weight. And he said, whose daughter are you? Tell me, pray, is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? And she said to him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. And she said to him, we have abundance of bran and feed, as well, and room to spend the night. And the man did obeisance and bowed to the Lord. All right, so it's not quite through the whole thing. We're kind of interrupting a little bit, but we do have the initial greeting of Rebecca here. Now, what's interesting about this situation is he immediately begins with this prayer that it's like, well, I really would love for the person, as a sign of this is the right person, I want all these things to happen. And then, of course, that's exactly what happens. But it is interesting that he even begins that way. So, what are some of the things that come to mind when you're reading this section?
Well, of course, not only does she do what he was hoping, praying she would do, but it turns out that she's Isaac's second cousin. So it really it is indicative of divine intervention. But it is an extraordinary account. But it shows, of course, the importance of these early families, these patriarchal families, where God does really intervene to direct these events as to who's going to marry whom and that kind of thing.
It's almost comedic though the way it's written, because he's like, grant me good speed to do this, and before he even finishes, somebody's coming out. It's just it's very it's beautiful, for fortuitous sort of situation. It's really nice. However, one thing that I think is interesting is, even though that happens so quick and all of this, you'll see that the servant does not lose his head. He's diligent the whole time. He's asking questions, and he's going through the motions. And later he even says, hold on, where is it? He says the man was keeping silent to know whether the Lord had granted success on his journey. So even as she's beginning to follow the process, and it seems like such a direct correlation to what he just prayed about, he's still a little bit skeptical because of the importance of the mission. And I just think that's important. I think sometimes people are a little bit overly eager to assume some sort of divine intervention in their life. And even this person, we don't even have his name, but this person who's a symbol of somebody who's very trusting in God, you know, believes in divine intervention, all of these things you can see throughout the process, he's still continuing to ask questions, and there is a little bit of skepticism about the specifics of the situation, which I think is interesting.
Here you have a servant of Abraham, not of therefore of Abrahamic stock, and yet with this tremendous faith, this relationship to God. So it's to his credit, but also it would indicate, the influence of Abraham. And also what he's looking for here is a person who is generous, who's willing to go above and beyond, and even to concern for the welfare of animals. This is important throughout the Bible, this spirit of generosity. And you have the tradition in Hebrew thought of tzedakah, of being righteous in terms of being charitable.
And in terms of animals, you see throughout the Bible the treatment of animals is a sign of character a lot of the time. You think characters like Balaam who beats their donkey and things like that. So, and that's something that is very progressive for the Bible in terms of the era, in terms of the treatment of animals. A lot of the laws that we'll be speaking about later are considered some of the first laws in human history about animal welfare. That God is not just concerned with humans, but he's concerned with all creatures, and he's certainly concerned with what kind of character you develop based on the way you interact with, lesser life forms than yourself. It's kind of important if you think about it.
Now, Abraham was a very wealthy man, and he used his wealth to garner a a wife for Isaac. As you see,
Hmm.
his family, yes, they had respect for God, and yes, they had respect for family, but the idea that she was hooking up with a wealthy family and that it was going to be to their monetary benefit was a factor in this if you keep reading. And later on, as you read about Laban, you know, this is very much a characteristic of Laban as you see how he dealt with Jacob later on.
Yeah, I don't want to read too much into it, but you almost get like a Cinderella sort of feeling because here she is, she's going out there, she's having to do all this hard work because watering 10 camels is no mean feat. That's several gallons of water that this person's having to do, and this is just something she does willingly, right? And she's just running around, doing. And the Robert Alter says that the language is very much about her hurriedness throughout the whole thing. She's scampering around, she's just doing all this stuff, and then she ends up marrying into a different sort of situation. But it is interesting because it's not her servant that goes out, it's her herself that goes out, and it just implies maybe the kind of life she had, maybe it was a little less than less than good, so it would give a reason why she would be rewarded by this too, because she was maybe being a little bit used as labor, and maybe she was a good person. It's interesting that it goes out of its way to mention two things: that she was attractive, but then she also was a virgin at the same time. And I think that's important because lest you think, well, she just wasn't very interesting, and that's why nobody did it. But it also tells you that specifically she was a virgin, which doesn't come up that much in the Bible to specifically say that. And I think it's just to show you again the kind of character that she had, because the presumption would be that perhaps in that society that would have been a little bit unusual, perhaps, since it's pointed out. It's just interesting.
It's all part of in a way, the character of Isaac. He himself is a miracle child, a type of Jesus Christ. In that, Christ was a miracle child. You could say even a greater miracle, but Isaac's birth was miraculous, and because of the age of his parents, and purity seems to be a factor there in Isaac's life. I wanted to mention that Daniel's comment about Rebecca was very insightful because it could explain maybe why she was not reluctant to leave home and marry Isaac, because maybe it was rough for her there.
Well, I mean, you don't get the best impression of Laban throughout the text, so I don't. Nothing about living with Laban seems particularly great. So and we're going to get to Laban. We haven't mentioned him yet in our readings, but we'll get to him. But yeah, yeah. I mean, you just get the impression it maybe wasn't the best living situation. Any other comments you have about this section?
No.
All right. Well, if you're enjoying this show, please like, subscribe, hit the bell. You'll learn more about the finding of Rebecca tomorrow.